The next set of directions in this lesson asks us to find the slope given 2 points, or sometimes we'll have more points than that. So we've got a variety of different types of problems that we could end up seeing. So let's take a look at the first one here. So remember what I said before we go on here. When we talked about slope we said was the change of the y values. So remember we said change, and when I talk about change of y's, that means I'm subtracting y's. So really what I'm doing is I'm doing this. I'm going y minus y. And of the two y values, see, here's a y value, here's a y value. So instead of calling it y minus y, we usually use a subscript, and we call this maybe y minus y1, and the y1 means it's just a different point than the original one. And remember, on the bottom of the fraction, we have the y values because y values on the top of the fraction because y's are more important. We're more concerned with how, when we talk about steepness, how high we have to go up or how far we have to go down, how fast. And so that's why when we're talking about slope, we want y's on top, because again, that's what we're concerned about when you think of the word steep. And down below we have the change of x's. And so remember, the change of x, we could rewrite it this way. We could write it down as x minus x1. Change just means we're subtracting. Like if today was, this morning it was 50 degrees outside, and this afternoon it was 70 degrees outside. And the change in temperature would be 20 degrees, 70 minus 50. So when we talk about change, we're talking about subtracting two numbers. So that's what we're going to do here. If you take a look at this, we can call this one x, and this one we can call y. Well, this one then, because it's a different point, I'm going to call it x1 and y1. I use the 1 again because it's a different point. So my little formula that I'm going to use, and I'm going to write down the slope again, but I'm going to use a letter or variable to represent slope. And they use m. And they came up with m because s kind of look like a 5, so they don't really use s's too much. But m stands for like mountain, and a mountain has slope. It has steepness. And so when we look at this, we're going to take the y values. And it doesn't matter which one you start with. I'm going to start with this one here, the first one, -7. And then we're going to subtract the next one, -4. So it's always minus whatever the other number is. Then down below, we do the same thing. But again, since we started with this y, I got to start with the same point's x value. So I put 5 first, and then the minus sign, and then whatever other number we have here, 6. And then we go ahead and do the work. So when we do this, I'm going to do some adding the opposite. Remember that? So when we've got subtraction problems, it's nice to do that. So we're going to change that subtraction to addition. So it's going to become -7 plus positive 4. And this is all over, and then we could treat this as an addition problem if we wanted to as well, plus -6. So I add the opposite to make the math a little bit easier, because I remember the rules with addition, and my rule is if they're opposite signs, I subtract. So here I'm left with a -3 all over -1. Well, that slope can be just written as 3 over 1, or we could just write it as 3. So either way, that would be our slope. Let's take a look at another one here. Again, we've got our x values, so I'm going to consider this one my x, and this one will be my y. And I'll call this one my x1, my other point, and this is my other y point, y value of that other point. And all I'm going to do is to find the slope. Again, I'm going to use that variable m to represent slope, because it stands for like a mountain, and a mountain is steep, and steep is slope. Steepness represents slope. So we take the y values. I'll start with this one, -2. And I write that first, so -2 minus, it's always minus the other one, -2. Down below, we go with the x values. Now again, I got to start with this one because I started with this point. So -2 minus 7. So we get to change this to an addition problem. So we'll do that by rewriting it as negative 2 plus positive 2. And then down below, we've got negative 2 plus negative 7. So when we go ahead and do that work there, we end up with, well, remember, opposite signs I need to subtract, and holy smokes, those cancel out and make 0. Over here, I end up with a negative 9. Well, negative 9 into 0, it's just 0. So we say the slope in this case, or m, equals 0. There's 0 slope. It's not no slope, it's 0 slope. Well, let's see what happens up here. Here we have 4 points. We've got 0, 25, 245, 465, 685. Well, we don't need all those points. We only need 2 points. So I usually take out these ones with bigger numbers. Just cross them off. We don't need those. All we need are these. And so we'll go ahead and rewrite what we've got. So we've got our slope formula goes this way. We just use m this time for slope. M equals, and then these are my y values. So let's go ahead and mark down which one we're saying is which. We'll say that this one is our x value, this is our y, and this one is our x1, and this one's our y1. And so I go ahead and put those in there. I have my 25 minus 45. And then down below, I take from the same point, so I start with the 0, minus 2. Again, you could add the opposite if you want. Since this is just, there's no other negative signs with the numbers except the minus sign, I could probably go ahead and do that work. And so I do that subtraction, that gives me negative 20 over negative 2. Well, I just reduce that fraction, and that just gives me 10 over 1. So my slope equals 10. So m equals just 10, or you could write 10 over 1 either way. So if you have more than 1 point, just cross off 2 of them, or how many ever you need to cross off until you just have 2 left over. Well, one more problem here. Another situation, we got 2, 3, and 2, negative 4. So again, this first number is your x, this is your y, and then here we have x1, and here we have y1. And so when we go ahead and substitute these numbers into our slope formula, this is what we've got. We're going to take the y value, 3, and I'm going to take away negative 4. Always minus, and then whatever other number that is. Here we have 2. I got to start with this number because I started with 3. So 2 minus 2. So I'll go ahead and rewrite this as that addition problem. And here's what I've got. It's going to be 3 plus positive 4. And this is all over a 2 plus negative 2. And when they're opposite, same sign here, I have to add. Opposite signs, I have to subtract. And oh no, I've got a problem. You can't have 0 in the denominator. This gives us no solution. You can't divide 0 into a number because it never ends. You can put any number in there. There's no answer. It doesn't make sense for us. And so we just say that the slope is undefined. So we just write undefined slope. Let's get in the habit of writing it that way rather than no slope. No slope, people get that confused with 0 slope all the time. So let's just say undefined slope, and we'll call it that. So there it is, our answer. Those are the different types of problems that you'll end up seeing on tonight's homework.